The scripture passage this morning is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. And this section of Matthew's gospel, starting from Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, it is known as the Sermon on the Mount because Jesus climbed a little hill and began to preach. And it is a very important teaching element of Jesus's ministry. And Joan and I will read this together. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying,
"Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled.
Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God.
Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you."
Hearing is the good news. Thanks be to God. This past week, the Los Angeles Dodgers won their first World Series championship since 1988. At the heart of 1988 winning team was the pitcher Orel Hershiser, who became the World Series MVP. But when Hershiser broke into the league in 1984, however, he was a timid pitcher who seemed to pitch as though every batter he faced was Babe Ruth. Then after a lousy outing, the manager, Tommy Lasorda, gave him a pep talk so transforming that it became to be known as the Sermon on the Mound, as in the pitcher's mound. That sermon changed everything for Hershiser, and it helped him to become one of the best of his era. Rather than a sermon on the mound, Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount that transformed not a baseball pitcher, but individuals throughout history. It begins with what seems like a series of contradictions. Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are meek." It seems to go against what our society says is important. We would think that blessed are the rich, those who are happy, those who have power. Theirs is the kingdom. Our society worships such people. They are the ones who make the Time magazine's 100 most influential people of the year. They are the ones who have the biggest yachts, fabulous vacations, and live in the most beautiful homes. Not so, says Jesus. Is it any wonder that the young people are staying away from churches? I have previously understood the word blessed as a word translated from the Greek word makariori, which means happy. So some Bibles actually say, happy are those who are the poor in spirit. But chances are, Jesus used the word for blessing not from the Greek concept, but rather Hebrew word ashar, which was used in the first psalm. In Hebrew, ashar means, in its literal sense, to find the right road. It is a spiritual concept. So when this is used, Matthew 5 now reads, "You are on the right road when you are poor in spirit. You are on the right road when you mourn. You are on the right road when you are meek. You are on the right road when you hunger and thirst for righteousness. Still, why would Jesus say these things? When Jesus says you are on the right road, he means that you are on the right road to God because God is like this. Jesus is describing the character of God, and this is the path. Furthermore, to more fully understand Jesus, we have to understand his historical context. Jesus lived at a time when the Roman Empire ruled the Western world with its military power, with superior weapons technology, and well-ordered government. A small country like Israel was easily taken over, and it became a vassal state whose wealth was extracted by Rome and taken to Rome. So Israel was basically a slave nation. As for the religious in Israel, they were part of the elite Jewish establishment. The religious leaders chose to collaborate with their oppressor and reap the benefits rather than siding with their own people. And the regular people lived in poverty and they were oppressed. It was they who mourned what the country had become. So during Jesus' time, if you did not mourn, then what does that say about you? The country has been taken over. Your people are suffering. Your people have no freedom and no dignity. So if you did not mourn, then maybe you were part of the elite who benefited from the current situation. Essentially, God is also mourning at the injustice. And if you are mourning right now because of racism, because of pandemic hardships, because of climate change, and because of oppressions and injustices in this world, then you are with God, who is also crying with you, and you will be comforted. Jesus also said, blessed are the poor in spirit. When we turn to Isaiah chapter 66, verse 2, God says, but this is the one to whom I will look, to the humble and contrite in spirit, who trembles at my word. God does not have high regard for those who are too proud, who think they are the greatest since sliced bread, who think they know everything, who think they are right all the time. Rather, God favors the humble and contrite in spirit. On this All Saints' Day, a person who comes to my mind is Agnes Gomsha Wozashiu, who was born poor in Macedonia in 1910. In 1948, she was a high school principal in India. 30 years later, she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize as Mother Teresa, whom Pope John Paul beatified her as Saint Teresa. After she passed away, it was made known that Mother Teresa suffered from being poor in spirit. In other words, she felt the absence of God quite acutely and painfully. What that did was that it made her seek God even more greatly and urgently, thereby helping her to become a saint. Similarly, Greek philosopher Socrates, realizing how little he knew in the great grand scheme of things, thought himself as very ignorant. Some of us have the awareness that God is an unknowable mystery with unsurpassed wisdom, creativity, and power. In that light, how can we not feel incredibly humble? And Jesus says, you are on the right road if you are poor in spirit, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. For the past 3 weeks, a group of us have studied together the book White Fragility, which was written by a white woman, a sociologist who does racial training for companies, schools, and organizations. What really shocked me and the rest of the group was the pushback she gets from the people who are receiving the training. Many people express all kinds of negative emotions, excuses, and denials about the existence of structural racism, which gives white people a huge advantage over racialized groups. The author Robin DiAngelo calls the pushback white fragility, which prevents meaningful dialogue and transformation while protecting the white privilege. Despite the incredible challenges that DiAngelo and other trainers face, they continue on to enlighten people on the issues of racism. And I agree with Jesus. You are on the right road when you work for peace and when you work towards righteousness. Yours is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus, in his sermon, outlines a pathway. It does not lead to financial riches, nor fame, nor power, nor status. It leads to something even better. It leads to God. The path to God is a path of blessing. Jesus says, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. I do not believe we have to wait till then. The reward is with us now, knowing that when we are on the right path, as we join with all the saints who have gone before us, and as we join with one another now. Furthermore, we also know that God is with us. This is more rewarding than a Hall of Fame career in baseball, and even better than winning the World Series. It all begins with Jesus' greatest sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. Thanks be to God.